Hello, I'm Diane, and today we're going to do a little mid-year reading check-in, how much I've read this year, how I'm feeling about my reading so far this year, and then I'm going to do sort of a wrap-up of what I read in May and June, because I've done wrap-ups of January and February already for this year, and I didn't finish reading anything in March or April, so this will be part reading check-in and part June wrap-up mostly. So let's start with the general check-in. So far this year, I've finished reading 15 books. I've also DNF'd 5 books. About half of those books have been part of a series. And my reading goal, which is the same every year, is to read 52 books, which is 1 book a week. So I'm behind by, I think by the end of this book, I'll only be 10 books behind, which I guess isn't great, but I feel pretty fine about it. I'm getting back into the habit of reading regularly, but I've also been reading a lot of lighter, cozier things than I normally would, which I think has been good to get in the habit of reading without having to put too much thought, I guess, without having something really dense that I'm trying to get through. But I'm also getting a little bit bored of all the cozy things I've been reading, which I think is a good thing because I'm starting to get more ready to read denser sci-fi or fantasy, which is what I generally prefer more. So now let's talk more specifically about what I read in the last 3 months, starting with the 2 books I DNF'd. I DNF'd The Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman, which is a prequel to The Black Tongue Thief, which I remember reading. I don't really remember anything specific about it, but I remember reading it and enjoying it. But starting The Daughter's War, I just really wasn't into the writing anymore. I might give it a try some other time when I'm more in the mood for that style of writing, but I don't know what's changed in my taste between reading whenever I read The Black Tongue Thief, it's been quite a while at this point, to trying The Daughter's War, and it's the same writing, so if you liked The Black Tongue Thief, you'll probably like The Daughter's War, but for some reason it just wasn't working for me, and I think it might have just been the wrong time to pick up that book for me. And the other book that I DNF'd was Platform Decay by Martha Wells, which is book 8 in the Murderbot Diaries series, which is a series I've really enjoyed all of the past installments, but I started reading it and I realized I just don't remember where we left off in the story. I don't remember who, other than Murderbot and a couple of the other non-human characters. I don't really remember most of the characters. I don't remember where we left off. And I think as the series has gotten to this point, remembering what's happened previously has gotten more important than the earlier installments. Felt a little more episodic, I guess. But now everything's kind of built up in the bigger plot. And I just don't remember it, and I didn't care to try and get through it without knowing what was going on. So that might be another one I try again eventually, especially there might only be 1 more book in that series. So if that series ends soon, I might give it a try just to wrap up the series. But for now, I just can't be bothered reading sequels if I don't remember what happened in the last book. And I'm not one to read books in a series just so I can read the sequels, to reread books in a series just so I can read the sequels. If I can't jump into the sequel and have it jog my memory, I'm just not going to bother. So for books that I did finish, I read The Wicked and the Damned, which is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson. I'm really enjoying this series. I think this is probably one of my favorite books that I've read this year so far. It is a romantasy series, but I have enjoyed seeing the way that the relationship develops, and there's so much other stuff going on in the plot that it's not just about the romance. Their relationship is obviously important to what's going on, but there's so many political things and other characters that are really interesting, and I'm just enjoying the series way more than I thought that I would, and I'm looking forward to the 3rd book. Then I read The Somewhat Wicked Witch of Brigandale by C.M. Wagner. This is a more cozier one. This is about a witch who takes in a baby that's abandoned at her house, and she ends up raising him, and he's a perfectly ordinary boy, and he loves cutting hair, and then she finds out definitively she had an idea, but she knows for sure that he is actually the long-lost prince, and people come to retrieve him and bring him back to the castle to be the king. And she follows him there and kind of meddles in all of his business and doesn't think that he can make decisions on his own and do things on his own, and kind of just wants him to give up being the king and come home and be a hairdresser. It's a lot sillier than I thought it would be. If you want just a lighter read, very low stakes, it was enjoyable, but I didn't love it. It's not something I really expected to be a favorite for me, but it was a cute, silly read. Then I read Before I Knew I Loved You by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, which is the 6th installment in Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This wasn't really a standout for me. I didn't deeply connect with any of the characters. I think how much I enjoy each of the installments in this depends how much I can relate to the characters, or how many of the characters I can relate to. But I'm still very much enjoying this series and seeing this exploration of who people go to visit with their one chance and what they end up getting out of it, and if it's what they hoped they would get out of it. Then I read How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jessie Silva. This is about a halfling, I think, and she goes to live on her own in her grandmother's old cottage. And when she gets there, there is a goblin living there who also thinks that the cottage belongs to him. So they make a bet that they'll live in the house together, and whoever leaves first forfeits their right to the house and the other person gets to keep it. So they live together and there's not very much conflict. So it felt a lot lower stakes and a lot less of them butting heads and really trying to force each other out. They were very respectful to one another. They end up falling in love, which I don't feel like is surprising at all. But like the lead up to that and the development of their relationship, I wish it had been a bit more tense and dramatic, at least at the start, until they start to understand each other. It started even from them making the bet very respectful and tame. I liked the idea of it, but it was a little too nice and cozy for me. And then I read The Book Witch by Meg Schaffer, which is about a book witch, and her job is to go into stories, mostly classic stories, that this group called the Burners tend to interfere with, and they're trying to destroy and erase from existence. And book witches go in to try and save them and correct things, and they get to spend some time in the book. And our main character is a book witch, and she falls in love with a fictional character. And when her grandfather goes missing on some secret mission, the character that she's in love with is a detective, and he shows up and helps her figure out what happened to her grandfather. And together they try and solve the mystery of what happened to him and get him home safely, and they also figure out the mystery of what happened to her mother, or a bit more about who her mother actually was, because her mother died when she was a baby, and all she has of her is a copy of a book, and she's never been able to figure out why she left her that book specifically. So this was a cute book. It was enjoyable. You go through a lot of different stories. There's a lot of mentions of more literary books, the classics, I guess. It kind of reads like a love letter to literature. There's definitely a lot of commentary on book banning and censorship in books, and there is a lot of genre hopping because of visiting the books and just talking about different genres and the way that stories are typically structured. There's a lot of more modern reader and writer stereotypes and tropes incorporated into the story. So I enjoyed this one. This was the most recent book that I finished. Currently, I'm reading Space Mullet by Daniel Warren Johnson, which is a graphic novel about a space trucker. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying that so far. And I'm also reading and almost finished with The Reimagining of Thornwood House by J. Johnson, which is about a woman and her adopted daughter who become the caretakers of this sentient house, and they try and help it through its grief of losing its last caretaker and try and earn its trust and become the new official caretakers, while also getting to know some of the people in the town and hoping to make a home for themselves there, which has been cute. It's a very cozy, very light fantasy story. There's like the mystery of what's going on in the house. The stakes feel pretty low. But that's everything that I've read in the last 3 months. And that's pretty much where I'm at. I'm starting to read more regularly and finish more books. I've been enjoying prioritizing reading more and finding more things that I'm going to keep reading and not just read a few chapters and then give up on it. So hopefully next time I'll have some more books to talk about, some better books to talk about. Not that any of these books were bad, but they're not the types of books that I'm gonna be raving about and recommending highly. Well, let me know what you've been reading this year, how your reading's been going, if you have any favorites that you've found in 2026. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me. That's all for me today. I'll see you next time. Bye.